Hello my loves, and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be doing the new To Booktube tag, which is originally from Between Chapters. I will link their original video down below, so thank you to them for this list of questions. For this video, I'm going to be answering a series of questions about myself and how I read, to give you guys a bit of an idea of who I am and what my reading style is. So the first question is, where are you located? I am a Canadian and I live in the province of Ontario, and I will not name the city so I don't dox myself. Next is, how old are you? I am 29 years old. Third question is, why did you join BookTube? I decided to join BookTube because sometimes you finish either a really good book or a really terrible book, and I just wanted somewhere that I could put out my thoughts and feelings and maybe connect with people who have the same thoughts and feelings about the books. Fourth question is, what is the meaning behind your channel name? I chose the channel name Artemis Daydreams because I am a big fan of Greek mythology, with Artemis being my favorite of the Greek gods and goddesses, and Daydream because it kind of evokes a fantasy and an escape from reality, which is what I find books do for me. Smush those two together, Artemis Daydreams. So question 5, what types of books do you read or want to talk about here? My most read genres are horror, science fiction, and fantasy, but I do try to read a little bit of everything. So I do read classics to middle grade, and I really try to expose myself to a wide variety of things. I will talk about everything I'm reading, but mostly my genres will be fantasy, science fiction, and horror. Question number 6, who are some of your favorite authors? My favorite author of all time is probably Douglas Adams. This is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. I read these when I was probably 11 years old, and they changed my life. And actually my first ever tattoo was a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy tattoo, and I will put a photo of it here. And so number 1 favorite author, I would say Douglas Adams. Unfortunately, he doesn't have an awful lot of work to read, but this is definitely number 1 in terms of impact on my life. An author that I've really been enjoying a lot recently is Mona Awad. I read Bunny at the beginning of this year, and last month I read both Rouge and All's Well, and I'm obsessed right now with Mona Awad. I find her concepts are just so intriguing. Her writing's fantastic. So Mona Awad, definitely a more recent favorite author of mine. And a favorite author that I would consider to be underrated or not as well known is Patrick Weeks. They are originally a video game writer, so they wrote for the Mass Effect and the Dragon Age video game series, which are some of my favorites. They also have a fantasy series, which I absolutely love and will recommend to anyone who is interested in fantasy. The first one is The Palace Job, and this is the Rogues of the Republic series. Question 7 is, what is the last book that you read? The last book I read was The Kiss Curse by Aaron Sterling. This is the sequel to The X-Hex. It's a fantasy romance set in a small town, and there's a witch who falls in love with another male witch, and this is kind of a lighthearted, fluffy romance with a bit of a fantasy mystery. And if you're interested to hear what I thought about it, that will be included in my November What I Read video, which I will be posting probably near the beginning of December. And question 8, what are you currently reading? I am currently on page 301 of Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. In Dark Matter, a man is going back home to his family after a quick drink at the bar, and he ends up being kidnapped at gunpoint, taken to an abandoned warehouse, and drugged. And when he wakes up, he is no longer in his own universe. He is in a parallel universe, and he has to try to get back to his family. It's very much so far an exploration of diverting paths and the impact of one decision on the course of your life. Question 9, what do you use as bookmarks? I try as much as possible to use actual bookmarks for bookmarks, and mostly I have ones that are given free from my local independent bookstore when you make a purchase. So I have about 8 of those that I usually am using, and if I need a new one, I just go buy a new book. Question 10 is show us your current TBR pile. So this is an updated version of my November TBR pile. Definitely Dead is still on here. I mentioned Definitely Dead in my video, so this haven't got to yet. I have Mayfly because Katie Coulson raved about it and I had to place it on hold immediately. I have Robots and Empire, which is the 4th book in the Robot series by Isaac Asimov. This is an interlibrary loan, so I will probably be prioritizing that just because I can't renew it from the library. I have The Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson. I finished Snow Crash a couple months ago and I'm really interested to read more of Neil Stephenson, so this one is next. And I have Bookshops and Bone Dust, which is the new release by Travis Baldree. It's the prequel to Legends and Lattes, which I really enjoyed. So this is my updated TBR stack. Not included here because it isn't physical is Fight Club, which I currently have checked out from Libby from my library. Question 11 is a set of which do you prefer? So first is hardcover or paperback. My preference is a paperback, but the tall paperback, not the short paperbacks. I find with paperbacks, they're not quite as heavy. Hardcovers can get really heavy and hard to hold sometimes. So paperbacks are nice and light. Also in Canada, they are significantly cheaper. And I prefer the taller ones versus the short one because I find it's a lot easier to open and read without creasing the spine, whereas with the smaller it tends to be bound a bit tighter, so you have to open it a lot wider and then you get creases on the spine. Next is ebooks or physical books. I prefer physical books. I find they are a lot easier to read for me personally. Looking at words on a page, I for some reason can just visualize what's happening a lot better than I can when I'm reading on a screen. I do not currently have an e-reader, so if I'm reading an ebook, it's on my iPad, and I find that cannot be conducive sometimes to my productivity because having the screen there and the notifications popping up can be distracting. So I am a physical book reader, but I will still read ebooks. There are some times where my library doesn't have a physical copy, they only have an ebook available. So it's not that I'll never read ebooks, I just prefer the experience of reading physically. And owning or borrowing books, I think that both of these can coexist and I don't have a preference either way. I really like owning books. They make pretty decorations. I find reorganizing my books to be a fun afternoon activity. Going shopping for them, either new or used, is a great time. I love buying and owning books. However, there are some times where buying a book just doesn't make sense. If it's a genre I'm not used to, if it's an author I've never read before and I'm not sure I'm going to like, I think that borrowing is a much better option. It also encourages you to broaden your horizons because you're more likely to take a risk on that new author, take a risk on a genre or a topic that you're maybe not as comfortable with, because if you don't like it, you just return it and you haven't lost anything. Borrowing also just makes more sense for me financially. I read a lot, I read very quickly, and I could not afford to purchase everything that I read. I did the math last year and did the calculations of everything I borrowed from the library, how much it would have cost me to buy it new, and it was almost $5,000, which is a significant portion of money for anyone. So I think that libraries are amazing. I was practically raised by libraries. I spent much of my childhood in them. I volunteered in a library through high school, and to this day I visit my local library probably at least twice a week. So borrowing and owning both have their place in terms of priorities and just financial feasibility. Question 11, what book or series got you into reading? I have basically always been a reader. I still remember the very first book I read on my own. It was Mickey Mouse and the Pet Show, and I grew up in libraries. My parents would drop us off on the weekend and we'd spend 3 hours browsing the shelves, taking out stacks and stacks at a time. Even when I was in high school, I volunteered at my local library, and it was a very small town. I feel like I personally kept that thing in business half the time because I probably checked out 50% of what went through that library. So I have always been a reader from the very first book. And then when I went to university, the dreaded required readings. I did a double major in law and film studies, and for law there were a lot of very long, very dense readings, and I obviously didn't want to do the required readings. Where's the fun there? But when I would try to read for pleasure, I felt so guilty about not doing my required readings that it took the fun out of it. So university kind of caused a very long reading slump for me that I only recovered from several years after graduation. And then in 2021, a friend loaned me their copy of The Lightning Thief, and I never read these when I was a child. By the time they were published, I had aged out of middle grade, or at least I thought I had, and I had already started reading adult fiction and considered anything below YA to be too young for me because I was a pretentious child. So reading this as an adult who has loved Greek mythology, it was just so good, so easy, so fun that I found my love of reading again. So I finished this at the end of 2021, and in 2021 I read 21 books. In 2022 I finished 284. That is how effective this series was at re-sparking my love of reading, and now we are here. Question 13 is, how did you discover BookTube? I discovered BookTube through the sidebar recommendations on a Mike's Mike video. So I was watching his video essay on the Pretty Little Liars TV series, and in the sidebar there was a recommendation for How to Train Your Gavin, his video on the Pretty Little Liars book series. And as a fan of long video essays of media I had never engaged with before, I watched it. I watched his Goosebumps video, and I was hooked from there and spread out to explore more of the BookTube community. Question 14, what challenges do you think you'll face with your channel? Editing. I think my biggest challenge is going to be editing. I don't have much experience with video or photo editing outside of a very quick job doing some color correction, and I currently don't have the best editing software. I'm using iMovie on my iPad, and I hope that I can develop some of those skills by doing BookTube. So if my editing sucks in the meantime, if I have ugly thumbnails, I am working on it, I will get there. But I didn't want that to be a barrier to me not starting. I have thought about starting on BookTube for months and months now, and I just felt like nothing I would put out would be good enough quality. And then I just kind of decided I'll never get better if I don't give myself that opportunity to practice, to gain the skills. So that is going to be my biggest challenge, but one that I am excited to face. Last question, where can we find you on social media? The only social media I have other than this channel is my Instagram. It is the same username, Artemis Daydreams. I will put a link to it in the description. You can follow me there, and I hope to see some of your beautiful faces. If you got through all of this, comment down below what your memory of the first book you read is, and maybe I've read some of those books as well. I hope to see you all next time.